You just talked to me about your take on the Russia-Ukraine, Trump, Zelensky, and you called it imbroglio, and I was calling it a brouhaha or a kerfuffle, and I wasn't sure, and then I thought, you know what? I think imbroglio is better. So jump right in.
All right, let's talk about what's going on here. Why did Vladimir Putin 3 years ago decide to invade? Now, it wasn't his first invasion, after all. His first invasion was in 2014. He invaded Ukraine. He took over the Crimean Peninsula. He annexed it. And he began an insurgency in the eastern areas of Ukraine that border Russia, the Donbass region, as it's called. Keep in mind that in 2008, Putin also went into neighboring Georgia, which also had been a republic of the Soviet Union, and he carved off 2 provinces for himself.
Ossetia, was that?
They're very good. South Ossetia and Abkhazia. Very, very good. Not many people would know that. I've been watching Putin. I consider myself an amateur Putinologist. I've been watching him for 20 years. And Elizabeth, you should know that, again, I first went to Russia under Soviet times back in 1969 before college. And then I went as an exchange student later. And I was a student at Leningrad State University. Rah, 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 go Reds.
Wow.
And among my fellow students was one Vladimir Putin.
Shut the front door. No, really? Did you know him?
People ask me that, and my answer always is, I got drunk on bad vodka with a lot of guys named Vladimir, so it's entirely possible. But I don't remember very much about it. My guess is not. It's a big school, as you can imagine, and we weren't in the same departments. He was, I think, in engineering and law, and I was I was studying Russian poetry and literature, which was very different. But I lived in a Russian dormitory and all. Well, an international. Anyhow, my point is that I do have a point. My point is this: my analysis is that Putin sees himself at this point in his life more rich, more money than he can ever spend. He kills people that he doesn't like, critics, enemies, whatever, with impunity. He's been doing it for years. Well, he sees himself as the Tsar. And as the Tsar, he has a mission. And that mission is to restore the Russian Empire, which for a number of decades was known as the Soviet Union. But it was an even larger empire than the Russian empires before it. He wants to restore it. Proper title for a Tsar is Tsar of all the Russias. What does that mean? Tsar of all the Russias? It means Russia proper, Rossiya. It means Belarus, White Russia. That's what that means, which is at this moment, I would say, a vassal state.
Can I interrupt and ask one question that's been on my mind for so many years? Why White Russia? What does that mean?
It's a good question. I should know a better answer to. I mean, I think it may have to do with a lot of white birch trees and that kind of thing in the forest. But I don't actually know. I mean,
it's homework.
River, the Red River.
We'll go back to it someday. Next time you're on, I need that answer.
If you got ChatGPT, you could ask right now.
I guess I should have done that.
Yeah. But then the other important Russia is Ukraine. And what does that mean? It means frontier or outskirts of Russia. And historically, it is complicated. They were, Kievan Rus was the birthplace of Russia, and those Russian Kiev. It is complex. But what I can also tell you, having gone to Ukraine many times, the Ukrainians do not want to be ruled by the Kremlin. They do not want to be ruled by a czar. They do not want to be considered little Russians, which is sometimes how they are called by
Are the
Russian.
Belarusians called little Russians too? I mean, are they all? No, just Ukraine.
This Ukraine is something I've never seen that phrase used elsewhere. And again, Putin is happy for now with Belarus being a vassal state under the dictator Lukashenko. For now, that's okay with him. Again, he might at some point he'll do what he wants to do. He might be happy, he might be satisfied if he could simply neuter Ukraine, have somebody who runs Ukraine kisses his ring. That might be enough for him, though I think he would like to conquer it completely. When he sent his military in on February 24th, 3 years ago, they meant to conquer Kiev. The tanks were rolling towards the capital, Kiev in Russian, Kiev in Ukrainian. Both Slavic languages, but they're not identical languages, kind of like Italian and Spanish would be, right? So he wants that back in the empire. And in a way, he needs it back in the empire. Population of Russia proper is about 140 million. Birth rate is not good. A lot of that 140 million are minorities, would be the easy way to say that. But what I really mean,
isn't there a lot of Muslims in certain?
when I say minorities, I include that part of what I mean. Because when you go east of the Ural Mountains, what you get to are these small, and not just, you get these small lands that were conquered by the Russian Empire. Russia has always been an empire, not a nation state.
Isn't China always been really an empire as well?
I would say that's right, and still is. Part of the empire that is Tibet.
We need to remember those things because, people talk about imperialism and settler colonialism with Israel and all this garbage, but the history of the world is a history of empire, and empires did not go away. When Ottoman Empire was crushed, thank you, that didn't mean all the empires left. And so we do,
You're absolutely right. There are some nation states today that used to be empires and don't and are okay with that. Holland was once an empire. Sweden was once an empire. Portugal was a great empire. Spain was an empire. They're okay with it. There are those former great empires that are angry. They have grievance that they're not the empires they used to be. That would include very much Putin and Russia. That would include Xi Jinping in China, right? I would include Ali Khamenei in Iran. These are all revanchist regimes trying to recover their former empires, their former power, their former greatness. They want hegemony in their region or more. All of them do. The Russian Empire, and this is one of the reasons people don't understand what you just said, is the Russian Empire didn't expand via ships like the British Empire. Expanded over land, all the way to the Sea of Japan. One of the most easterly cities of the Russian Empire is called Vladivostok. You've heard of Vladivostok?
Isn't that the Kamchatka Peninsula?
It's across from Kamchatka Peninsula on the land. Vladivostok, Vostok means east. Vlad, as in Vladimir, means conqueror. Vladivostok, conqueror of the east. That's what that means. So he is trying to restore the Russian Empire. He would like 40, if he can get the Russians, if he can get the Ukrainians into his empire and make them into Russians, that's 40 million Russians, and they are Slavic Russians, not Muslims, which, as you say, have a higher birth rate than the ethnic Russians do, and they're not from the conquered peoples. And he has a problem even with immigrants, oddly enough, coming in from places like Kazakhstan and Turkmenistan and Kyrgyzstan.
Why do they not control their borders? Because Russia seems like a state that would control its borders, whether it's expanding or...
It can control its borders, but people come in and they start to work, and they can, but he does. But they need labor, and he doesn't want to throw them out.
Does he not mind that he may eventually have Muslim, kind of Go ahead.
All the Muslims are not Central Asia either. I mean, think of Chechnya.
That's true.
Early on, Putin fought a terrible war against Chechen separatists. The Chechens look like Russians, but they're Muslims, right? They were based on the Ottoman Empire. And he razed to the ground the capital city of Grozny. He killed 100,000 at least Chechens, and he conquered them, and he subjugated them. And now he is using them as well to go fight Ukrainians, because the Chechens say, okay, you want to send me up to fight these and kill these Christians? Maybe that's a good idea. I can do that. And so that's part of what he's done. So this is what he is up to. He is trying to restore this empire. Now, part of the problem is if he conquers Ukraine, what does he do next? Does he say, that's enough, I'm happy? I don't think so. I think he then has the natural resources and the human resources of Ukraine to utilize. And these are the Ukrainians are now the best combat soldiers in Europe, far. So he puts a bayonet in their back and marches them westward toward the NATO countries.
Which would he take first?
So I think first he would take Moldova, which is not a NATO country. because
Uh,
it's really low-hanging fruit right now. I would say if I were he and I were guessing or betting, I would say he would he would probably want southern Lithuania. Why southern Lithuania, you ask? Very interesting. Because there's a route through southern he
to
goes
that
through
other little
Belarus.
thingy.
You're right.
Uh-huh,
He goes through Belarus. His troops go through Belarus. They go to southern Lithuania. There's a road there, and it takes them to Kaliningrad.
yeah.
Kaliningrad is a province of Russia that is not contiguous, and it's where the Baltic Fleet is located, Russia's Baltic Fleet. By the way, why is it not contiguous? Because it used to be Kronenberg, part of Prussia. And
Right.
after World War II, this and then people forget this too, Elizabeth. After wars, very often territory changes hands, and aggressors in particular are punished by losing territories.
Unless
And
it has to do with Israel.
then they can't have
Then
a
they yeah,
no, that's
there's a
right.
different set of
No,
standards there.
no buffer zone, not an inch of Gaza. Right, exactly right.
So
Exactly right.
Kaliningrad,
Yeah.
I'm glad you reminded me of that because I always look at that little thing and just, I knew what had to have happened there. So they would, and I've always wondered, it's kind of like Syria with that little place over there off, is it Syria? Trying to think, like my turn. Anyway, forget that. But that Kaliningrad, obviously they're going to want that. And how do they get to Kaliningrad right now?
Right now, it's hard. They got to go through a sea route. Maybe they have to have permission from Lithuania if they're sending supplies through. There's two ways to do it. One, again, is through southern Lithuania. There is a highway. You can see it on the map. Or they can go through northern Poland, and there's a gap there. And then people talk about them going through Poland and taking northern Poland to get to Kaliningrad, and that way. But
But you got to
Lithuania
ask
would be
permission pretty much.
yeah, so you're going through a foreign country. You can send supplies, and they may let you, and probably would. But if you said, "I'm just taking this road now, and southern Lithuania is mine," well, it's a NATO member under Article 5. The attack on Lithuania is an tantamount to attack on the United States and every other NATO country. Are we going to fight for southern Lithuania?
So,
Or if we don't, NATO collapses.
yeah.
That's the end of NATO. Those are the two choices. Would Putin like to see NATO collapse? Of course. Would Xi Jinping like to see NATO collapse? Of course.
Yeah.
Then he says, if you're not going to fight for Lithuania, you're not going to fight for Taiwan. Much harder. And Ali Khamenei says, okay, that's good. NATO's collapsed. That's good for me too.
We had
Although he
Afghanistan, Middle Eastern. We have Ukraine and Kaliningrad and Lithuania and, then Taiwan. I mean, it's all of these little places that have been on a razor's edge, or we've all how many years have we been thinking about when is China going to try to take Taiwan? When is it going to all come to a head? But it's just, I think that's why that Afghanistan withdrawal, which was the most humiliating day I remember in 20 some years more.
Yeah.
That Americans do not understand how weakness looks to people like Xi, Putin, Khamenei. Well, I get confused between the first and the second sometimes. Khamenei, exactly. And Gaza, Hezbollah, and all the rest. The Middle East.
Right. It was no coincidence. It was like 6 months between the capitulation to the Taliban in Afghanistan and Putin saying, "Okay, my tanks roll."
But some
Because we're going to
people,
fight the Taliban, we're not going to fight him. So he knew that. So he saw Biden this week and thought, "I'm going in."
and I like how you lay out, this is what you think could happen. Of course, we don't know which would be the first state. Moldova sounds good to me because it isn't NATO. And moving up to Lithuania, that makes sense. And then are you saying that would he stay with states that, like, would he go over to Belarus? Is he going to go to Poland? I mean, do you really think that he would actually try to take Poland?
Well, Poland is going to be more challenging because what the Poles have been doing and are doing right now is arming themselves to the teeth. spending something, if not now, soon. They're pledging to spend like 5% of their GDP on defense. They're going to have some kind of, I mean, the polls see this possibility we're talking about very clearly, and they're trying to prepare for it. And the way you prepare for it, and the way Ukraine should have been prepared for it and wasn't, is you build a deterrent capability. So that Putin looks and says, I mean, when Putin looked at Ukraine, he thought this is going to be a piece of cake, right? And most people thought so, including most military analysts in Washington, say, 3 days, a week, 10 days, most, it's over. And now it's been 3 years. They didn't understand. And if you remember, the Biden administration said to Volodymyr Zelensky, we can extricate you. We'll send a plane. We'll get you out of there. And he remember his famous quote, I don't need a ride. I need ammunition. Right? Because we are not going to do this. We're not going to fight. And one thing I wanted to add, if you look at the history of Ukraine, you understand why they are so adamantly against being under Kremlin ever again. In the 1930s, Stalin imposed a man-made famine on Ukraine, the Holodomor. Millions of people, millions of Ukrainians died. There's a wonderful movie I recommend to you and your listeners called Mr. Jones, and it's about a British journalist who goes in the 1930s tries to interview Stalin, but ends up going to Ukraine to see if it's true or not that a famine is killing millions of people because people are denying it, and he escapes from his mom.
And the New York Times is denying it.
Particularly the New York Times. Walter Duranty was the correspondent. He's played by a wonderful actor who is, having parties and doing drugs, drinks, girls, and I don't know that. Won a Pulitzer Prize for his coverage.
And they've never given it back. And he was saying, let them eat cake. Oh, sorry, they don't have cake.
That's right.
Now, you know that there are a lot of conservatives or MAGAs or whatever, just people that would disagree with you. To be honest with you, when Russia invaded, I was obviously horrified, I think like anybody but Russia, right, maybe. And then I started noticing something over, the many, many months. So I'm thinking every once in a while, I'll hear somebody that I don't disrespect at the very least, and that isn't a stupid person, or it may even be somebody that I think I have a lot of respect for, and why are they wrong about this, where they will start discussing this chain of events, and instead of going through the whole thing, when Kamala, oh my gosh, I just said that like it was Hebrew. Kamala. Sorry, I was this like Amaz. Anyway, when Kamala went to, I guess it was Munich, I don't know if it was a security conference, and Putin, and I've seen clips that he's saying just commit to Ukraine not entering into NATO, because that puts military, a military buildup on his doorstep, and just commit to that. Now, is that all a lie? I mean, whether he was being insincere or not, why would it almost seem like nothing? It was that we didn't even know about it until later. Why wasn't this a big deal where it was discussed more explicitly, where he came and supposedly made this offer, and then UK, US said, no, we're not going there, or NATO, that yes, we're going to, bring the Ukraine into NATO. So clear that up for me.
I will clear that up for you. Ukraine has long wanted to be in NATO. A lot of countries want to be in NATO. Countries like Montenegro. Why do they want to be in NATO? Because it means you've got collective security. It means you got the U.S. at your back to help you. It means you're probably not going to get invaded and conquered if you're in NATO, because you have the Article 5 commitment that an attack on one country is an attack on all countries. That is a good deterrent not to attack a NATO member. So Ukraine wanted to be in NATO, no question about it. Could Ukraine have been in NATO? There were people who wanted it to be, but actually it was never feasible. Why was it never feasible? Because to get into NATO, every single member must vote for your accession to NATO. Every member. Do you think that Germany, to take one good example, would have voted to include Ukraine in NATO at a time when it was getting most of its natural gas from Russia
And
through the
still
Nord
is, isn't
Stream
it?
pipeline, too much of it, and they closed down the Nord Stream pipeline. They didn't finish building the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, so
Not
they're not getting that way. But they were totally dependent on that gas, and they would never have voted for it. Hungary would not have voted for it. They couldn't have gotten into NATO because they would not. And then the other thing they say, yes, but Putin felt threatened by NATO on his doorstep. Which NATO country was going to march into Moscow? Really? The Danes? The Dutch? The Americans? I mean, most of the NATO countries, and this has been very much Trump's complaint, is you have absolutely incompetent militaries. You're not spending much on them. What you are spending on are retirement benefits. You don't have tanks that can roll. You don't have ammunition for your guns.
Yeah, they are pathetic in that respect. I mean, maybe
But
that's a little too strong of a term, but what
it's a
I'm
little
saying
too
is
strong. They're not the
it's a
worst
little
at
too,
all. But their militaries are way too small.
there's
I
certainly
mean,
no deterrence unless we're involved. And I find that somewhat objectionable. They have 500 million people there. They make a lot of money. And so I would assume that even though you're fully on this one side where it's like the Tucker Carlsons and, oh, Jeffrey Sachs, he is,
yeah,
and I don't know
yeah,
where Mearsheimer is, but
bad.
yeah. Well, tell me something since I'm just going to always ask you all the questions that I've wanted, like Belarus and all the rest of it. Okay. I personally find Jeffrey Sachs to be so offensive. And what I wonder about is how has he achieved, especially within a MAGA realm, any kind of credibility when he is just a puppet of the UN and George Soros? And to me, he is if I were to define and draw a picture, a cartoon of somebody who would define everything that MAGA is against, it would have Jeffrey Sachs's face on it. So what's the deal with him?
Yeah, I know he's from the left. He always
He's
has been
far left.
a man of the left, far left, I would say. But he is somewhat defensive of Russia, and that appeals to people like Tucker Carlson. And he, I guess, like Mearsheimer, kind of blames NATO for making Putin scared. So he kind of fits in that sense. It's
He's
kind of a
useful.
horseshoe theory, where the left and the right meet at a certain point.
Oh, okay. Yeah, the horseshoe thingy. What would you say? Is Trump doing the right thing? Okay, firstly, I have to tell you that Zelensky, I was so shocked by what happened, and I think I have a balanced view of it. He is no diplomat. He is not he has a lot of personal angst and rage, and I think pride. Okay, I'm a Christian. I read my Bible. I know a little bit about, like he's a Napoleon wannabe or something, and he's got pride. And I think, I don't know where this is. The covetousness would be entitlement today. I just feel all that from him. But okay, we are talking about Ukrainians in Ukraine. So you, to a certain extent, you have to separate. Like, I would hate Britain if I thought of him as Keir Starmer, right? So, we have to say that too. So what is your assessment about the imbroglio and how it's all going to fall out?
So a couple of things. One, I would say, understand he has been a wartime leader for 3 years, seeing hundreds of thousands of his people get killed. He is tired. He is stressed. You got to, understand that.
True.
Two, he believes, and I don't think he's wrong, he says, I'm on the front lines fighting a common enemy. Why is this all seen as charity? Do you not? You Americans are spending less than 3% of your defense budget, about 2.8%, really tiny bit. And you're giving it, and you're spending that on weapons that are going to me and the Ukrainians, and we're using them to diminish the number 2 adversary the U.S. has, to destroy his tanks, to destroy his planes. I'm doing a good job for you guys. Why don't you appreciate that at
But they
all? Why
can't
do you think
win,
this?
can they?
Okay, let me go, but let me finish.
Okay,
So
so
under Biden, he was given I think he could have won at an earlier point. Biden gave him enough not to lose, but never enough to win. It's I'm going to give you ATACMS, but you can't use them to fire on targets in Russian territory. So you can't make it too uncomfortable. I don't want to provoke him. Then I would also say this. He had a mission, Zelensky did when he went to the White House, and he failed at that mission because what was his mission? The minerals agreement had been worked out by deputies long before.
yeah,
Long before. If he wasn't going to accept it, he shouldn't come to the White House.
that's right.
If he was going to the White House, here was his mission. Come to the White House, smile, sign, eat lunch, skedaddle. That's all. And say thanks. Thank you, Mr. Trump.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Americans. Thank you, thank
Do
you,
you
thank you.
think the
That's
Democrats
what did
had
he do?
his ear?
What did he do instead? He essentially tried to renegotiate the disagreement in a foreign language in front of TV cameras. I'm sorry, that's like with the Walendas. They may not use a net, but they also don't go with a gorilla on their back. And that was a huge mistake. He may have been, I think, encouraged to make that mistake by people like, Senator Chris Murphy, who said, if you don't have a security guarantee, what good is it? Here's what good this mineral thing was. Lindsey Graham said it because now Trump can say, we're going to get these minerals, this untapped natural resource. It's going to pay for what we've already supplied and what we will supply. And now Ukraine is not a burden, but a benefit. So this is good. And he should, and
But
just
see,
go with that.
Zelensky had to know that because it had to have been explained to him by all of the and so
yeah, but the Democrats didn't explain it to him that way. I think Lindsey Graham did. Lindsey Graham said, "Don't take the bait. You're going to be baited. Don't take the bait." But Chris Murphy said, "You need a security guarantee, guy. You need," and he got convinced of that. And
that's almost like being in NATO. If it's a security
it's
guarantee.
Exactly what he actually wants, and he wants a NATO-like guarantee, and he's not going to get it from Trump, and that's just realistic, and I understand that, and so he should have understood that and not gone for that, and he also didn't quite understand this, I think, that Trump sees himself as the greatest deal maker in the world. He sees problems. How do you solve problems? You make a deal.
Right.
I'm going to make a deal between Russia and Ukraine. How am I going to do that? I'm going to be the middleman. I'm going to be the mediator. I'm going to be the honest broker. That means I can't be seen as Zelensky's partner. It means I can't antagonize Putin. I have to flatter Putin. Now, by the way, and this may be where we end up, right now what we're seeing in the news today is he's gone back to Putin, maybe the way I suggested in my column in the Washington Times, and said, you see, I threw Volodymyr out of the White House because he wasn't serious about peace. Now I need to know you're serious about peace. And he's not hearing that Putin is serious about peace. Putin's saying, oh, good, you understand now. Ukraine is my territory. Nobody can be there that I don't want to be there. And the question is whether Putin really wants a pause. Here's the real truth. We're not talking about peace here. We're talking about a ceasefire. It's not the same thing.
Right.
It's talking about a pause. What happens during this, and both sides may want a pause. That may be the one thing they agree on. They need a little time to rest, rearm, reorganize, maybe retrain, all kinds of things like that. That's what Putin will do, know that, and that's what Ukraine will need to arm to the teeth during any pause, helped by the Europeans, I would hope helped by us, so that, goes back to what we were talking about before, when Putin, in a year from now, says, I'm tired of this ceasefire, I want you the rest of Ukraine, his generals say, sir, it's more complex than it used to be. You may not want to do this today.
Right.
Let me show you why. And then you have a frozen conflict. A lot of frozen conflicts, a lot of places.
Turkey and Cyprus, I'd kick him out so fast. But anyway, but don't you want, okay, everything that you've said, you're gonna laugh at me when I say this. Isn't it even remotely possible that over the next 4 years, let's just leave it at 4 years, that a relationship could be developed with Vladimir Putin, and that maybe eventually he would enjoy the friendship of the West, and instead of being considered, this never-ending enemy, that he could actually just, we could let our guard down and like, can we all be friends kind of thing? Is that, okay.
No chance. No chance.
No chance.
No chance. He doesn't want to be our friend. He is 2 reasons. One, he has a no-limits partnership with Xi Jinping. They've met 40 times in the last couple of years. They are part of an axis of aggressors. It includes Xi Jinping, Putin. It includes Kim Jong-un in North Korea. It includes Ali Khamenei in Tehran. What they want to do is diminish the U.S., end the U.S. as a great power, displace the U.S. in global leadership so they can rise to what they want to be. That's vital. Also, the ideology that underpins what Putin believes is based on a philosopher. If you don't know, you should take a look at it, called Alexander Dugin. And he says, Russia is not a European power, we're a Eurasian power. He says very clearly, America is the enemy. He says very clearly, we don't believe in any of the things they believe in. Their values that they impose on the world, like freedom, tolerance, individuality, rule of law. We don't believe in any of that. That.
Do you really want boots on the ground there, Americans?
Not at all.
Okay,
you
don't.
Of course not.
Okay.
There's no need for it. There's no. What
you
we need
think
to
that
do,
they could win? You think that
I think
Zelensky? Do you want
look,
Zelensky out? I mean, would you like him replaced or? Okay, go ahead.
Where I am, look, I would if I had my druthers, I would see Putin defeated and Zelensky and Ukraine triumphant, but I don't believe that's going to happen. So what I do want to see is at the end of the day, and this comes to the frozen conflict, that at least Ukraine retains its independence, its sovereignty. And I'll give you 2 examples of where this has happened in the past, where it could be a model. 1, we fought a war ourselves. I don't want to fight a war in Korea. At the end of it, do we defeat the enemy? No. But South Korea
You're right.
has, since 1953, been chronically threatened, but not imminently threatened. Of course, we do have 28,000 troops there since 1953, which is Zelensky would love to see there. But maybe he can finish the French troops. And the other example is the Winter War of 1939. Most people don't know what that is. That's when the Soviet Union tried to drag Finland into its empire, waged a war. The Finns, without any help, fought just courageously. And at the end of that war, what happened? They lost 11% of their territory, retained their independence. And 2 years ago, what happened? They joined NATO. That's the kind of future I see for Ukraine.
Did you see a movie about that on Netflix or something? Oh my gosh. I know. It's amazing. It's an amazing. I'll email you about that.
Email that movie. I'll watch it tonight.
I will. I'm going to find that. Okay. It was, my husband loved it. Okay. So listen, this has been really great. This is the one conflict.